Ask the Podcast Coach for June 8th, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. And happy Saturday morning to all the folks that have to make their way or migrate their way over to a new YouTube instance. But I have a little of the Barry White voice going this morning. Conference week for me, I must have said, you know how people count their steps? I count my words each day. And I was definitely doing 10,000 or more words every single day. But it's great to be back.
Yeah, you had your big Gallup event. I know the one time you shared a picture, like you were on a round stage just surrounded by thousands of people.
Like 1,000 probably in those days. This year we did a virtual experience stage. So we had a pretty good sized stage, round table on top. I interviewed guests. Our job was to entertain the virtual, because we do a both physical and virtual conference together. And the best way we figured out to do that is to keep the virtual folks occupied. You know, in a physical conference, you got to move people from the keynote to the breakouts. And that takes 15 or 20 minutes to get everybody situated. Yeah. But what do the virtual folks do when that's happening? You send them commercials? No. Nah. Do you play music? No. We would do conversations and interviews with them. And so I must have done, 8 or 10 of those with interviews, and we had the headsets, and next year we're going to build the ESPN Sports Center kind of thing. It was super cool. It went really well, and so I appreciate it. But I did do a lot of talking, so my voice seems a little weird. Sorry. How long was the line to meet Jim Cullison? Because you are a star, man. Like that's your, in that environment. Yeah, in that environment, it's I get to shake a lot of hands. I must have taken a couple hundred selfies. I'm showing up all over LinkedIn. If you look at the hashtag Gallup at work, that's our conference hashtag. It's just all these selfies. It's not all of that, but I took a lot of selfies. It's kind of fun. I say a local celebrity for a week, and then it's time to go back to work. Like there's podcasts to be made. There's work to be done. There's complaints to handle.
You go home.
Can you being the mayor of Clifton Strikes, can you repave the roads? Kind of deal, right?
Well, the fun thing is then you go home and you're like, your head's the size of, a giant balloon. And, you walk in, you're like, hey, can you take the trash out? It's really getting stinky. And you're like, but I'm the mayor. Dishes are piling up. And pick up the dog poop in the backyard. So, yes, all those things. Well, what'll keep you going if you're getting kind of tired is, that's right. A good
this never changes.
No, there we go. And of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. Let's remember this. They see you before they hear you. And the beautiful thing about Mark is the fact that he is a podcaster. He's been podcasting for probably close to a decade. And he's not one of those guys that you got to explain what's going on. He's done almost all of my logos at this point. Every other show that he didn't do, I don't do anymore. But Ask the Podcast Coach, Podcast Radio Show, Podcast Hot Seat, your podcast website, those are all done by Mark. And he's really going to sit down with you one-on-one and kind of ask you what your show's about. And then it's his marketing mind that's going to kick into gear and really give you something that matches your brand. And you're just not going to get that on Fiverr. It's amazing. And he does, if you need a whole website, if you need a PDF, if you need artwork, if you need a logo, anything that you need to make you look good, there's only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co. And be sure to tell him that Dave and Jim sent you. I'm right on Mark's head. I need to update this screen.
I slide it over summer up.
That's
whatever.
it.
Big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. This week, he looked at the longest day, 2 instances of that, and then Saving Private Ryan. Of course, this was the anniversary of D-Day this week. And so there's a lot of those movies, not a lot of them. They all happened during that time. Dan, of course, covers those. Check it out today, based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
Yeah, I saw a couple pictures of dudes that were like there, and they're like 101, and you're like, dang. So
yeah,
we're getting kind of crazy.
a couple of years ago, right, there was a big movement. A lot of our World War II veterans were passing. We were losing them. I think Saving Private Ryan brought that out, right? Tom Hanks talked a lot about that. We are definitely on the edge now because even the youngest ones, I think, are 100 plus. So an important time, I know, for all veterans, as we think about that important time. So I appreciate Dan bringing that stuff to light.
Hey, and I want to bring up, I shared it to our patrons, but if you haven't checked out Jim on the big podcast show over there with David Hooper, who's often fills in when Jim is not around, and it's a great behind the scenes of what happens with there's a lot of stuff that Jim and I do that we kind of just do because we figured out that works. And, like right now, I see where Jim is definitely looking at something on his screen, so I'm going to keep talking. And then there are times when I'm, especially me, like right now, I'm looking at the chat room, and there are times when Jim will keep talking. I remember one time I think I texted you or whatever, like, hey, I need to leave or whatever. Something was happening, and I was like, okay, show's yours, Jim, for 2 minutes. So that's the fun of being live. But I thought it was a good interview.
How'd I do with? I mean, okay, listen, we're friends, obviously, but you separate us, and then we're not with each other, and I really wanted to use that as an opportunity to celebrate the friendship that we have and the partnership that we have, and just how cool it is to come. I mean, this is kind of a highlight of my week. Every week is to sit down with you. We always have a good time. How would you, as you think about you listen to it, you tweeted it out. I still need to do that, but any feedback on that as you think about being interviewed? Would you give me any advice on that?
That's a great question. No, I thought it was good. I found out we were friends. I was like, oh wow, Jim actually really likes me. No, just kidding. I was like, all this time I thought he was just putting up with me. No, the one thing, because you didn't ask about it, but I thought you were going to go there, and I was like, oh, okay. There are times when our pre-show is, Jim, do you have anything? No, not really. Dude, I got nothing. I went out there, it's the same 5 questions. I can't find anything that's remotely different. And Jim will go like, that's all right. The chat room will come through. You'll watch. The chat room will come through. And there are many a times every time really, when the chat room comes through. So I always appreciate the third, host of the show is the chat room.
In American football, we call that the 12th man, right?
That's right.
There's a lot of, and so I like the idea of the third host of the show is our audience. Good. I'm glad. I wanted to use that as an opportunity to celebrate the partnership we've had. We've been doing this a long time together. And you're right. Every week, the chat room provides some, but we also have enough between us. There's a lot of things happening. It's kind of weird how the topics land. We get done with one of these, and there's always, not always, but mostly like a single thread that goes through all of those things where you can kind of tie the show together. I notice you don't have any problem getting the show notes out and getting a title for it. You do it every week, and we get it figured out. So anyways, I appreciate your partnership, Dave, and it's always great to be able to celebrate that and say it publicly. You just never know how anybody else is going to take it. So I was hoping I did a good job, and it landed with you as like, yes, we are friends. We have a good time. But I think I talked about it on the show. We don't always agree. It's not an agree fest. We oftentimes will say, you know what, I disagree. I like it when I say something, I see your face change, and you're like, you're like, no, I want to disagree with that. I want to disagree with it.
Yeah. I thought it was good. And, just the fact that people can have a difference of opinion. I think it'd be really boring if we were exactly the same. I mean, that's the thing I love about it. We both have our own common podcasting knowledge, but, you do podcasting for work, you work with coaches. You have this you've got your gadgety, geeky thing going on. And, so Jim can get his nerd on. And then, I've got my power rants, and I got my side of working with podcasters. In fact, we're going to jump to one in a minute. I know Ralph has given us a question where to jump on, and Randy Brott gave us one. But I saw this in Reddit this morning, and I was like, I actually left this guy a really long reply. And so it's from Woke Bloke 42069. Oh, wait a minute. DR just gave me a question. So this is the fun part of being Dave. I'm reading while the chat room's going crazy. So
we'll come back to it. Just mark it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did.
Nope.
And so buying equipment also, what's the point of podcasting? It's a long one here, so get comfy. I've tried making 3 to 4 different podcasts since 2019. My most recent attempt involved, I thought, interviewing people, and I only got to 1 episode, then went into a bit of a career crisis spiral after graduating university. Not a single attempt over the years got past 10 episodes. So right there, life happens. That's normal. Like sometimes, it just does. Getting over 10 episodes, I did an on-purpose bad podcast, and I got more than 10 episodes. So I would want to go back and think about that. So that's my thing. Like if you can't get more than 10 downloads, there's something really wrong. After reading a business book recently, I realized I would absolutely, I think, love to find interesting inventors and business people to interview. However, after doing all those somewhat half-hearted attempts, key ingredient there, notice that, underline that, half-hearted attempts, I really want to up my game, get some good recording equipment, buy a second camera, and go into the world and film podcasts wherever my guests happen to be. I wanted to connect in person, not just do them on Zoom calls. Also, partially, I never want to Zoom call a stranger again for the rest of my life. So the thing that I'm worried there, he thinks the solution is equipment. And I don't think it is. How do you tell yourself to do the thing when it's so blatantly obvious that the odds are against you? AKA, you have to be like top 0.001% to make money. Also, it seems like every, at least popular business podcast out there is basically just the result of someone with a popular book starting a podcast. I really disagree on that too. There are a lot of celebrities that have started podcasts that were absolute crap, and they're no longer with us. But the whole thing about the 0.001% making money, the really good ones do, and it's not via ads, by the way. Maybe I shouldn't waste my time interviewing people. Yeah, then underline that one, and start writing self-help books until one of them hits. There's something to go. I always love people that want to make themselves an expert. I want to position myself as an authority. Oh, great. What's your podcast? Well, I interview other people. And I'm like, what? That seems kind of counterintuitive. Meanwhile, I'm hesitant to spend money on something when there's a very small chance of being even remotely successful with it. Also, what makes this time different? So again, you have to define what is success. If success is I want to grow my network and you start interviewing people, congratulations, you haven't made a dime, but your podcast is very successful. So continuing on. So should I go out there and try to compete with the big dogs and blow $10,000 on top of the line equipment? I'm going to stop right there. No, do not spend $10,000 on equipment. Should I hire a roadie to come with me to the shoots and building out a set for more local podcasts, or should I just give it another try and see how it goes? I'm sick of seeing how it goes. I want to make something actually good. I'm sick of being mediocre. Maybe I'm just delusional. Well, I will say there are people that have delusions of grandeur. I did that. I started a podcast about customer service and thought I was going to be like the king of customer service because I've won awards at customer service, and this is going to be the best podcast. Here comes Dave Jackson, customer service expert. And, I got 7 downloads, and that was about it for me for all that one. Plus, it was my job, and my job is not my passion. Continuing on, I have a YouTube channel with 25,000 subscribers. I've sort of let the channel drift for the past 2 to 3 years. Well, I can tell you something about that. Those 25,000 are not, have fun getting those back. But in the grand scheme of the internet, I'm still nobody. Should I just do the podcast with the gear I got just for fun? Ding, 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 possibly the right answer. Or should I spend a bunch of money in hopes that my podcast will be a home run? Also, why on earth do some people do this podcast thing? There's so much bloody competition and against people with teams of tens of producers and writers and just crazy stuff. We've basically come full circle to traditional media levels of competition and budget, so why does anyone bother? I know I sound cynical as hell, but I'm genuinely curious if people know they have no shot and therefore I just accept my fate, or fight against it with money and energy and efforts. Do not fight against it with gear is not the thing. But here's my question. Here's a great point. I got married a second time, knowing that the success rate was 30%. Why did I do that? Because I love this woman and I believed in it and I wanted to do it. And so I did it. Jim, how many kids do you have? 17?
Easy now. It's just 5.
5.
Just 5.
But I mean, those things are expensive, right?
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
they stay expensive. Yes.
And they stay expensive. So why does anybody have kids? Plus, you know you're going to screw them up, and you know they're going to eventually they're going to disappoint you at least once. So why would you have a kid? Because you want to, and you have this, I want to spread my seed and have my name live on long after me. We do all sorts of stuff that the odds are stacked against us. And I was like, but my thing was, I didn't hear it here, but when I hear what's the topic I can do that will require the least amount of effort and make the most amount of money, I'm like, don't start a podcast. You're not and even his inventor thing. Okay, so you're going to do a show where you're going to interview inventors. Okay, so that the listener can what? Like, what's in it for the listener? Oh, so that I can learn how to be an inventor. Maybe you're like Shark Tank, kind of, right? Okay, so obviously you want to monetize. So how are you going to monetize this? Are you going to sell a course on how to be an inventor? Are you going to find a sponsor? But think about it. This is a pretty niche audience. Not everybody's wanting to invent something. But on the other hand, if it starts to take off, that's a pretty tight niche. So you should be able to charge more for ads. I mean, it's just what's in it for you and what's in it for the audience. But you're wringing your hands, Jim. So what?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just cracking my knuckles and stuff. Just thinking there's so much in that. Like there's a few things in there. I think one of the things I want to fight against a little bit is this idea that, there's already big podcasts. I can never break in. No matter what I do, it's not going to matter. And here in Omaha, we have a coffee company called Scooters. And they're local to Omaha. They started here. Actually, the very first one is just up the road from me here in Bellevue. And they could have, they started Scooters at the height of the Starbucks first expansion. Starbucks went through several expansions where they moved out and then they kept pulled back and then they expanded again and then they pulled back some again and they expanded for a third time. And they opened during that very first expansion. And coffee houses were everywhere. Because on the first expansion that Starbucks did, there were all these independent coffee had gotten hot, right? Gotten popular. There's all these local coffee houses that you had. And then you had Starbucks was just, and I don't know what it is about that, but the name attracts people. People just wanted to have that cup. Well, hold on. I got one right here, right? They just wanted to have that cup in their hand and they wanted to walk into church or work or whatever, be carrying a cup of Starbucks. It was a little bit of, whatever was going on there. I won't judge it, although I already did.
I just have to play the sound effect.
I just did with what I said. But anyways, Scooters could have said, there's too many coffee houses. It's the competition. It's already been done. It's too big. It's whatever. And they came in with their own local flair. They came in and started with 1 and then did 2 and expanded to 5 and then came up with a franchise model and began to move around the country, and they're being very successful. Now, in Sarasota, Florida, is there a Scooters? No. Is there a Starbucks? Probably, right? But Scooters has found its niche. It has found it's found its people. And you will find people here in Omaha who, when I was going to Starbucks, I hardly go anymore just because I brew my own, but I would say something about Starbucks and they go, yuck. That's like burnt coffee. That's the worst stuff. My wife doesn't like Starbucks coffee. She's like, it's terrible. It's the worst stuff in the world. Well, there's people who just swear by it, right? So if they would have said, listen, the world is cluttered with these kinds of businesses that, even though the market was saturated, started. At the same time, there was a company here in Omaha called 13th Street Coffee that wanted to try and do something like that. And they made a run at it and they weren't successful. So you would say, Dave, if you only have the Scooter story, you go, oh, you should always start in the midst of market saturation. And well, no. And then, but if you only looked at the 13th Street Coffee example, you'd be like, you should never start anything, right? I think sometimes we try to boil these things down to it's always this or it's all, why? Because it's simple. It's simple. We want simple solutions. We want to be told, yes, I should do it or no, I shouldn't. When in reality, it's infinitely complicated, and we won't know till we try. And so I think in this case, now he's tried a couple times and it's failed. Well, okay. I mean, at some point, look, if you're trying this and it's not working and you're not enjoying it, get out.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop.
Yeah.
But if you're trying it and you're enjoying it, but you just haven't hit you haven't hit your measurement, Dave. If our measurement was 100,000 downloads, we should quit. Right? We've never come close to getting a single show to have 100,000 downloads. That's not our purpose. We're here, one, because we love hanging out with each other. Two, we love hanging out with the audience on a live basis. And then whatever the number of downloads that it benefits, and it's good for the school of podcasting. That's kind of why we do this, right? We know that going in.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to say, just don't resist the urge to always try to boil things down to it's this or that. It's, we do it in politics. Stop. Think about some things and figure out what works for you and your why. Well, even though I'm not a big Simon Cynic fan, think about your why and then move forward or don't. But it's all about you in that. I don't know. Respond to that, Dave. What do you?
No, you hit the nail on the head. So let's say you come up with an idea for a show. I'm going to do this show for these kind of people so I can help them blank. Okay, great. I don't know. Do you think that's a good idea? Well, it sounds like you know who your audience is. Why are you doing this? I just want to put it out there because I've been that guy and I want to give him encouragement and she needs some help. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, do it then. And they're like, but do you think I should do it? And I'm like, there's only one way to find out. I can say I've got peanut butter, I've got butter and bread. I've never had just a peanut butter sandwich. Do you think that would be good? I don't know. Let's put some butter and peanut butter on some bread and eat it and see if it does it stick to your mouth too much? No, the butter helps with that. Do it. And I mean, I said, there's only one way to find out. And we're all like, this guy is like, I'm just going to fail again. Or maybe you won't.
With that attitude, you will.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. And the other thing, I'm going to play just a few seconds of this because it's really long because I've heard people say this over and over, and I hope it's going to work. My PC's been a little freaky lately.
So when we started our podcast 3 years ago, we already had quite a bit of connections.
You become a six-figure blogger, and is it really possible to do it in a year or less?
So I wouldn't say like it is a typical route. I would say that like probably people are talking about it. The more typical is like you need like 3 years.
Okay, that's enough of that. But I mean, I have another 3 minutes of people going, it took about 3 years. And that's 3 years of not stopping. So that's where, in most cases, I mean, obviously, again, if you're mentally having issues and your health is failing take a break. But I see people and I think they want it to be like almost like paint by numbers. And I want that with storytelling. I'm like, if I just add stakes and I start closest to where the action is, and if I do this and check this and that, it'll be a great story. And it's like, not always. And it's like, well, okay, I'm consistent. I've got good artwork. I've got a good microphone. I've got this. And I'm like, well, okay. But that doesn't, there is no, I'm starting to, this is weeping into my head and I want to keep it out. I think there's some of it that's timing and luck. You know what I mean? Sure. But if you think about some kid, there's somewhere right now in America, there's a 14-year-old kid that loves playing football, right? He wants to be the next Tom Brady. And the chances of him being the next Tom Brady are really slim because he's got to play through Pee-wee and high school and junior league and whatever. And then he might get into college. And that whole time we're hoping he doesn't get his brains bashed in. And then he might get drafted, but then he has to make the practice squad. And then he might make it, but yet that kid loves playing football and that's why he's doing it. So why do we do things when it might not work? Because we like doing it.
Yeah. So, well, and we do know if he doesn't do it, I can guarantee he won't be, and I'd say Patrick Mahomes because I can't see.
Right. There you go.
But, and I don't like the New England Patriots. Sorry, Ed Sullivan. But if he doesn't try, it's definitely not going to happen 100% of the time. That I don't have many guarantees in life. But I do guarantee you, if you don't go for it, you won't get there, right?
That's it.
So you got to try. However, I think you got to have, going for one goal. And then if that goal doesn't happen and sitting back and, well, that's it. My life's over. you got to have some other things going on, with you. You've got to have you got to be open. And, and I hate to add the complexity to it in this way, but how many stories do we know of companies that just were on the brink of quitting or failure, and they just waited one more day, and then boom, right? Now that's a little dramatic, but you get it, right? Sometimes we're that close, and if we quit too early, it goes. Or the businesses with individuals who put too much into it and waited too long on a failure. I mean, we have in the business world today, we have books that come from both sides. Some that say, take a risk and spend everything and really go for it and never quit. And some that say, you know what, on your first fail, quit and pivot, right? We have these, there's the gurus, the business gurus say quit and pivot just as much as they say never quit. So what do I do? Well, okay, this is where you take stock and you engage the noodle and you say, hey, what's best for me? Like, this is why I hate this guru mentality with books and podcasts, even though I kind of do one about, you're like, guys, quit listening to the gurus and thinking just one of them has the key to success. Certainly take what they say, take what works for you, move forward with it. But this is your journey, not theirs. You take this and say, what works best for me? And then how am I the most happy in this? Right? How am I the most happy in this journey? It's stressful. There's times you worry. Those things are going to happen. It can't be happy all the time. Wouldn't it be awesome? No, then we'd have the Matrix. So you got to, take the advice, but you create your own journey.
Yeah. The chat room saying, give it 1,000 days. We don't need no stinking permission from the Sex Pistols. Jeff C says, I don't know many business or people who put all their eggs in the podcasting basket right at the beginning. Yeah, it really, let's see here. There's a lot of things.
Randy's got a good comment, right? He says, this is why there's no formula. And there are formulas. There are pieces of formulas to put together, but it's a complex formula, right? No formula is secret. We each have to figure it out. And I can't agree more with Randy. I mean, I really like what Randy does. Can't agree more with it. You've got it. And listen, I'm not saying you're not. I know many of you listening to this are struggling with it, and you just the struggle is good. Like, embrace the struggle on this because the struggle is good.
All right. So here's my other question, Jim. So let's say you're doing pretty good and you get 2,000 downloads of your show, but you really want 5,000. Okay. Alakazam, you have 5,000 downloads. Now what?
Exactly.
Like what? Okay, because
it's 10,000.
Because I say this because I went through this. At one point, the School of Podcasting was occasionally getting 3,000 downloads an episode. Okay, and I was like, okay, there was something in my brain that was like, I want 3,000 downloads. I don't know why, but I wanted 3,000 downloads. And then the IEB came along, little haircut, and then Apple came along, bigger haircut, and I'm not getting anywhere near 3,000 downloads anymore. And it's one of those like, okay, but like, why was that the number? Because I don't judge my success on downloads. I judge my success on how many people are signing up at the School of Podcasting. And this was a good week at the School of Podcasting. And so there is that thing where it's like, no, I want more people. And I'm like, okay, why? To prove that your stuff is valid? Like, well, you should know what's valid based on the research you did to do the episode. Unless the episode was just Ask ChatGPT. And I'm really starting to sound anti-ChatGPT, and I don't want to, because it does some really cool stuff. I'm not sold on Ask ChatGPT, use it for your content. That's the part I'm like, if we have time, I might show you something I'm playing with right now. And it gave me 44 sources. It was an AI tool, and it gave me the 44 sources that it gave. But in the end, the content was, hey, how do I lose weight? Eat less and exercise more. And I was like, and here's your 44 sources that told you that. And I was not quite sure.
Yeah. You might have a podcast that is just meant to encourage people. And is it going to be a message that's going to resonate with tens of thousands? Maybe not. If it doesn't, and you encourage one person, hey, you've done your job. However, that being said, you might go at a podcast whose goal is to move a product, right? Or to move something, influence something, change things. And that numbers are important. Like in that case, this is at work. we watch our numbers. Now, we don't obsess over them, and it's just one component of it, right? Certainly we monitor the channel and monetization of it and some of those kinds of things. But you begin to, and it's okay to make a podcast to make money. I think sometimes we poo that a little too much. It's absolutely great. Just realize that's what you're in for. Then numbers do matter. Then engagement, or, we know registration to our newsletter is super important. So we talk about that, encourage people to do that and to get that done. So just know what you're trying to get at, and then remove those barriers as you start looking at it. It's like, hey, if it is to get downloads, okay, how do I restructure things? And I'll be honest, Dave, I don't know very many businesses this story happens over and over again, but I don't know many companies that were started and the founder says, I didn't spend any money on it. Said by no founder ever. They usually say, I spent every dime I had, and I went up to I borrowed up to here, and it was a super giant risk, and it paid off. And sometimes I wonder, I'm not saying it is, but sometimes I wonder if one of the keys, one of the things to success is taking a giant risk, because you're so much more engaged when you're all the way in.
He did say
you're all the way in. Yeah.
He did say he kind of half-hearted the previous ones. And I'm like, one of the things that I am a walking contradiction of is I tell people you should do one really good podcast, and then I start another one, so it's like, but Randy says, why do you want 5,000 downloads?
Right.
And then Jive says, it blows my mind when I hear about new podcasters trying to automate their process. It's like having somebody else do your hobby for you. That's an interesting take. And then I love Danny Brown from Captivate. I'll take 100 engaged listeners and fans and supporters as opposed to 1,000 generic downloads every day. Yeah. And then part of it is just, I enjoy it, Gary says, because I feel like I learn something new each time I interview someone. I just listened to the book from Serge Tankiak, something like the lead singer of System of a Down.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the guy in Beverly Hills Cop.
No, but I want to be very American and call him Serge, and it's Serge. Oh, okay. It's the guy from System of a Down, that guy, curly hair. Yeah. And he's kind of at times woo, but he says, really the art isn't in the finished product. It's the art is you going through the process of making that. And I was like, I think he's got a point there. And here's the interesting thing about that is he cannot sleep on a bus. He just can't. And he's like, so consequently, as you might imagine, I hate touring. He goes, because by the end of the tour, I'm a zombie. And he said, so after they put out 2 albums in 1 year. And I mean, they literally, number one, they're as big as they can get. And he said, guys, I don't want to tour anymore. He goes, I want to keep doing this and that. And so he's like, and at one point he said, you guys should find a new singer because I'm kind of holding you back. And he's like, I love you guys. You're my brothers, but I don't want to do that. And then a typical band thing where you have something that works. You got 4 people and they all didn't stay exactly the same. And so he's like, I want to put some of this music in. And the guitar player's like, no, I write the music, you write the lyrics. And he's like, well, you can write some lyrics. You started to write more lyrics. I'll write more music. And that's why they don't put out new music anymore. They can't agree on who's doing what. But here's the thing. He just said, I'm not doing that anymore. And what's interesting is they went years without touring. And then they said, hey, why don't we just do a couple shows? I can do a couple shows. Because he had back surgery. I mean, he had all sorts of, physically, he has a hard time with it. He goes, but let's do a few shows here and there. Like in 2023, they had 1 show. And he said, the interesting thing is we make more money doing less work because, hey, if you're going to go see System, you got to go to San Francisco this year. That's the only place they're playing. And he goes, we actually make even more money than we did for the year than if we had, when they were gone for 5 years. He goes, we made more money with less shows and got paid more than we did when we did a ton of shows because it's the old supply and demand thing. So
for sure.
When I heard that, I was maybe that I have to be everywhere thing, at least in music. I realize we're talking podcasting, but I was like,
I think it's similar. I think it's similar. And yet there are times being everywhere works for you. I mean, I think about Phil Collins and his career with Genesis, starting as the drummer. Listen, you kind of wonder what Peter Gabriel thinks. He left Genesis right before they got
right.
Now, it's pop popular. They'd wanted to be a progressive band. Peter leaves. He goes to do his own things and was successful in his own ways, had a following in his own ways, but certainly not the rocket success that Phil Collins had. Now, Phil took the approach in the 80s and 90s to be everywhere. He was literally everywhere.
Yeah.
If you remember Live Aid or one of those, he took
the Concorde
in England and then took the Concorde to do the one in America. That was his philosophy. That's what he was happy with. Phil was the most happy person when he was on stage, and he would say his worst moments was when he wasn't. Like his life was a mess. A lot of his songs, like Taylor Swift, a lot of his songs are breakup songs. I don't know why she gets all the credit for it. A lot of Phil Collins' songs that he wrote, all breakup songs. He had a couple marriages too. He had some really bad experiences, right? So it's not just Taylor Swift, friends. Phil Collins was doing this long before Taylor was.
Yeah.
But he was happiest when he was in front of people performing. And he did it until he's literally crippled now, right? I mean, he played and drummed and performed, fell off the stage in 2008, I think, or 2007, hurt his back at a Genesis concert and never been the same since. And I saw him in 2018 at the I'm Not Dead Yet tour. They bring him out, put him in a chair, and he holds the microphone and doesn't do a thing. Now, his band is awesome, right?
Right.
Even in a crippled state, Phil would rather be on the stage. So if you want to be on the stage in front of a microphone all the time doing these things, you do that. Don't let anybody tell you can't. You can be everywhere. And being everywhere is not bad. But Dave, to your point, if you need balance, if you got a family, if you're whatever that is, whatever those pieces are, and you need to bring it back, that may be equally successful as being everywhere, right? You decide on that. That's that should be the title of the show. You decide. Right, on this.
Well, and Dan makes a great point. He said, but System of a Down had to do a ton of shows to hit that level. That's true. That's a good point.
They did. No, you're right. They had to have something. You didn't all of a sudden just say, well, I'm a band. We're going to play once a year. It's going to be popular. You're like, nobody knows who you are.
You are, and they played everywhere. And the other thing was, there's a band that nobody sounds like. People go, well, they're kind of like Rage Against the Machine. I'm like, no, you're not listening, because System of a Down has something that most bands don't, and that is they like to surprise you. They'll be going along and it'll just be this. It's weird, and it's like, so they're weird and they're silly. They have a song. It's all about advertising, and it's want to buy the pie, pizza pie, every minute, every second, buy. Want to buy the pie, pizza pie, every minute, every second, buy. And then the chorus is pepperoni and green peppers, mushrooms, olives, chives. Pepperoni and green peppers, mushrooms, olives, chives. And they're saying this incredibly fast. And you hear it and you laugh because you're like, did that guy just say pepperoni and green peppers, mushrooms, olive, chives? Pepperoni and green peppers, mushrooms, olive, chives. And that's meat therapy. It's just the weirdest, silliest stuff you've ever heard of. And I was like, I remember the first time I got these CDs, I'm driving to Pennsylvania. I'm working for a company who was supposed to be to teach people how to set up, to use their phones. That's how long ago this was. But it's me and my boss, and I got these CDs from the library, and we just sat there and howled. We're like, what are we listening to? Like, what is this? And I think Sting, there's an interview with Sting, and he said when he listens to music, if somebody hasn't thrown in some sort of ever so slightly curveball to surprise him, he's bored. And so I'm working, this week's episode of the School of Podcasting is about, okay, what does make great content? And the answer is, it's hard, and it's also like golf. Just like Randy said, there's no formula. It's this, sometimes it has this, sometimes it has that. So it's kind of tricky. But we do have a question from Ralph.
Got a couple.
Yeah, we got a couple in here, yeah. If you're willing to discuss some audio things, always. I'm switching mics for my show, and it has presets for noise, gain, condensing, and I'm lost as to what to select to make the best sound. Here's how you do this. You go, here, let's just play with this. So if I go, all right, this is me with processing on, And this is me with processing off. This is me with processing back on. Record what you're doing as you're doing it. And then, so you'll have one with like, okay, here's one with noise on. Here's one with noise off. And then just vote with your ears. And realize just because you have them doesn't mean you have to use them. I remember when I first got a DBX, it was this noise gate compressor, big bottom, and I just turned all the knobs and put out an episode and immediately got feedback. They're like, I don't know what you're doing with your sound, but you're rattling the tonsils out of my teeth. So be careful with that.
Record it too, and then play it back in with a different set of headphones so that you can kind of get a feel for. Record it, take it into the car, and play it so you hear what you sound like inside a car or whatever. I think the important part on that, Dave, is we can, once we set the levels and we leave them there, we kind of get used to them. And you stop hearing things that you used to hear. This has been my struggle with lighting too, as I've been working on my lighting here, is you kind of get, after a while, you're like, okay, I'm not going to look at it anymore. And so listen to the feedback that you get, like in your case, hey, you might be okay with teeth rattling, whatever. But when your audience says, hey, like I got some feedback one time, I was playing the opening music on Home Gadget Geeks too loud. And one of my listeners said, I actually have no idea what you say because the music's so loud. It's overwriting what you're supposed to be saying. And I say the same thing: news, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. That's kind of our tagline, right? And he's like, I have no idea what you're saying. I never knew it was that. It's like the cappuccino hold the foam on the in the beginning of this show, when you're playing the music for Mark. So also make sure you're listening to your audience. So mess around with it a lot. Try a lot of different things. First, get it to your ears the way you have to hear yourself. So get it to the way you like it. Record a bunch of it. Play it in a bunch of different environments. Get a bunch of feedback on it. Then once you dial it in, I say don't change it until you get feedback that tells you otherwise. Because your audience is going to want your audio on School of Podcasting is different than your audio here. I think you do some different processing, or I hear it differently because I could be doing it live with you, right? But your sound's a little bit different on the School of Podcasting than it is live here on Ask, in my ears, my opinion, right?
Oh, live, definitely. Well, yeah, because I take what we're doing live and we are missing it's a plugin I put on everything I do there is some post-processing that goes through this. Yeah. So, yeah. And
have you ever gotten that feedback? Has anybody but me ever said they noticed the difference between the two? And
nah. Well, that's the thing. We can spend hours tweaking our audio. And, I am not the audio engineer that's like, oh, you need to boost that 17K and take out about 82, about a half a decimal. If you could sniff the 300 dB range and, it's like, no. I'm like, I listen to my audio from when old, new, whatever, and I'm like, oh, that sounds different. And I'm like, yeah, but it's listenable. Like, as long as it's not harsh and ripping off my head.
No, I think your School of Podcast audio is a little flatter. It's easier for me to listen to in the car, where here you have more depth. This is my perception, by the way. This could be totally opposite of what you're trying to do. But here, there's more depth in your voice. It's a little richer and a little more complex than what I hear on School Podcasting when I go over there and listen to that show. Good or bad? Well, I listen to you here live. I like the richness of it live. When I listen to School Podcasting in the car, and I appreciate it a little flatter. So for me, it worked.
And if you want to have fun, do the question of the month, where everybody sends you really wide ranges of audio that I'm like, eee. So
I just put those all through
Alphonic. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I wanted to say Audacity. I wanted to say Audition.
That's usually what I do. Just at least to get, Gary said, Curtis Judd, if you aren't watching Curtis Judd's YouTube channel, excellent video tutorials about audio processing. Did one recently for the DBX 286, which is the thing I was talking about, and also did the Rodecaster Pro 2. So yeah, Curtis does really in-depth stuff. So that's it. I'm dying to hear. There's actually next week, Sounds Profitable is doing a thing. It's a report called Ad Nauseum, and this is interesting. This is where it comes down to trust. And so so think about this, a company that works in the advertising realm of podcasting is doing a report on, are there too many ads in podcast? And my cynical mind popped in and like, let me guess what the advertised people say. Oh, we need more ads. People love them. And I'm like, yeah, but it's Tom Webster. And I trust Tom Webster because he's been doing surveys forever. And on the other hand, if they say, oh, everybody pile in more ads and then they don't work, well, then his customers, the advertising people, are going to go, this podcasting thing's a piece of crap. We're out. So I was like, no, I can see he's going to, not that Tom would ever lie, but I'm always like, wait a minute. Anytime a report comes out, the first thing I do is like, who made the report? Like, let's consider the source. Because sometimes, so, but that is coming out next week. So in fact, if anything sounds profitable, they have somewhere, I need to go find it. They made a report for like little podcasters like me and you that are trying to get advertisers. And I need to go over and find that report because I was like, oh, I need to find that and show that to the people at the School of Podcasting. And before I could say, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, there was another report out, and then they do a lot of reporting over there, so I need to go dig that out. But speaking of that, Jay...
Can I add one more thing before? Were you going to move on and stop it?
No, we're staying in the advertising space, but go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead if you want.
Well, Jay says, I've started using dynamic content to promote my guest tour dates. By the way, that's really nice of you to do. I'm running at post-roll, knowing it won't get as much listeners as pre-roll. Do you think running at pre-roll is frustrating? My one-word answer for that would be yes. I don't think so. See, my pre-roll, this is what I want to hear. Ask the Podcast Coach is brought to you by the School of Podcasting. Find it at schoolofpodcasting.com. Intro music. Like, I'll accept like a 5 to 10 second intro. But when it's like, do you swallow saliva in small amounts over long periods of time? Ask your doctor if, blah, blah, blah is right for you. In fact, I'm not a big fan of pre-roll. The first thing I want to hear, because I saw the title and I like, oh, I want to know more about that. And it's like, and I know Joe Rogan, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you're not Joe Rogan, So I'm not a big pre-roll. And if it is, it's a quick one. And it's like, today's show is brought to you by podcasthotseat.com. I'll tell you more about it later. Check it out, podcasthotseat.com. Bam, intro music, whatever it is. So I'm a big fan of short intros. Jim, apparently you are not. I
disagree with you, Dave. This is it. This is our last podcast together.
Okay, next topic. No.
Exactly. In this case with Jay, I think it done strategically because it's promoting the guest's tour dates. And oftentimes the listeners of his show are coming because the guest name that's in the title. And so it's not, it's not a Pepto-Bismol ad for, that's just showing up out of nowhere. It's not just a random inserted ad. It's Jay using the pre-roll to promote the tour dates, right? I think if I understand that, Jay, you can chime in.
Yeah.
And if it's not, you should do that. But it's appropriate. So the pre-roll the pre-roll is appropriate to the content that's in there. Now, listen, Rogan can do this and get away with it because he's Joe Rogan. And you'd be like, well, why can't I? Because you're not Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
Your listeners may want something. They may not care, to be honest with you. I run a pre-roll on Shout Engine. Oh, maybe that's not the right one.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it. And that thing gets, 20, 30, 40 listens an episode. I don't promote it, but it does get it. And no one's ever given me any feedback through that. Like, stop the pre-roll, for God's sakes, right? So will it work? So Jay says I'm correct. Whew, thanks, Jay. That's good to know that I read that correctly. Again, think about it for your audience. And so I do think, and I'm agreeing and disagreeing with you, Dave, from that standpoint. But I think in that case, it's a perfect use of the pre-roll where the context is appropriate to the content.
Yeah, that's it. And then Danny says, that's a short right there. I've listened to the start of an episode that had 3 pre-rolls, and then I got 6 minutes of the episode before I got the first 2 mid-roll, and I was out of there. Yeah, see, that's my thing. When I hear pre-roll, I'm like, this person isn't about serving the audience. That's just me. But I'm like, this person is all about, I got to make, Now, on the other hand, I'm like, wow, apparently this podcaster needs to eat. And so I get that. But I mean, I wish, Cast-O-Matic is the app I use because it's podcasting 2.0 enabled, but it only lets you start up to 5 minutes. So when I listen to Conan O'Brien, the only far I can have it automatically start is at the 5-minute mark, which is a bummer because he interviewed Ron Howard and the interview started at 13 minutes. And then the thing that got me, this is the one talking about ads, is Big Pharma drives me nuts. I think one thing that's wrong with America, without getting political, but that's too late for that. But the U.S. and New Zealand are the only two countries that allow drugs to be advertised on TV. And I would like to see my senator take that off the air. But I'm listening to Conan O'Brien, and I joked when that show first came out, I'm like, he should rename it Conan O'Brien Needs Some Cash, because there's a ton of ads in his stuff. And I'm in the shower, and Conan ads are Conan. At least he tries to make them funny and unique. And they're usually a lot of inside jokes with his assistant that I don't get. And I'm just like, ugh. And if I'm somewhere, if that phone's in my hand, I'm hitting skip. But a Big Pharma ad came in, and it really, I was like, I will sit through horrible Conan ads where he makes fun of his assistant. But when the end of the interview says, ask your doctor if Gaba Baba is right for you, I'm like, screw you, Conan. Like, don't make me listen to those kind of ads. I was like, ugh. So I'm really looking forward to this report coming out from.
Well, folks vote with their ears. Right?
That's it.
They vote with their downloads.
Yeah.
And if you get feedback, if you start, Jay, as you're doing this, if you get feedback that it's not, I'd put a comment. It's, I think Jive had said, it doesn't get to the content. What if the ad is the content? If Jay interviewed Taylor Swift, we'll bring Taylor back in. If he interviewed Taylor and the first 15 seconds or 30 seconds were like, hey, here's a real relevant thing you should know. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, which is why you're probably here, you could go see her there, right? Boom. You're into the show. Actually, that's super helpful, right?
Yeah. Dan says pre-rolls are great for timely announcements. Like I made one on the podcast rodeo show saying, hey, I'm going to rebrand this thing. So if you want it at the $5, thing, go sign up now. So that's, yeah, I guess the point you made, if it's relevant, but when I hit play and I hear an Ozempic ad, I'm like, really? I'm so happy I have diabetes.
If you can do that, do it. Like if you're in the space where you can run 3 pre-rolls and make a crap ton of money doing it. Yeah. Do it. You just have to earn that. You have to earn that right to do those kinds of things. You have to earn. Listen, Dave Garofalo at Scar Authority and good friend, he runs 7 ads every 30 minutes on the show, and everyone would say that's a disaster. Right. Those ads sometimes get more talked about than the show, right? And they've made funny songs and done funny ads, and sometimes. Listen, some of those ads people remember because they're funny. And he's had his advertisers pull a few of those like, yeah, this is not going to work. I'm not going to do this. Right. And some of them love it. And some don't even know they're advertising on the show. So it's one of those things like he does it because he can. He also set the podcast up with the expectation that there was going to be ads. Why? He's a business guy. Yeah. Why would I do a podcast and not make money off the thing? Now, he sells a very targeted product. And so, there's some, I kind of have to envy his approach because he started, sometimes I think we undershoot our own ability. Like, oh, I'm so scared I'm not going to get any listeners. I'm not going to put anything in there that will make anybody walk away, and I'm not going to do any ads. Well, if you do want to go do ads after you get popular, it's a lot harder to add them later than it is earlier. Yeah. So have a little confidence too in yourself. Be like, no, I'm going to do this. We're going to have some spots if that's what you're going to do. We're going to have products for ads or sponsors or affiliates. Build those things in and have the expectation that's going to get done. He breaks all the rules. Dave does. Dave Garofalo. He breaks all the rules. I've been on the show a couple times. He breaks all the rules. Gets away with it because his stuff is good and his audience loves it.
And there's no place, if you're advertising cigars, I don't think you can advertise those in magazines. Like it's
not anymore. Maybe not even in podcasts. We've called them candles at times on my own show, so I don't get knocked off YouTube. When we're burning candles.
Nice.
Yeah.
Danny has a suggestion. He says you could do some A/B testing and X amount of episodes with pre-rolls with dates as an example, and then some episodes advising at the beginning, dates at the end. So, which is what Jive had suggested. He said also this is Jive, says also get good at reading ads. I listen to Marin or Huberman read their ads because they're good at reading them. Yeah, Mark Marin is great because he'll just be talking and then all of a sudden he'll be like, and that's when I went over and the cat was puking all over the rug. 15% of you know that they're like, look, and then all of a sudden, and by the time you realize he's reading an ad, you're like, oh, it's too late to fast forward now. He's almost done. So, but speaking of ads and pimping things, we should take time to thank our awesome supporters. Yeah. And awesome people. And we also want to thank, this thing called the School of Podcasting for this is what the show is about. This is where I'm from. You get our step-by-step courses. You get unlimited coaching, which is still, as much as I thought that was going to be a fun kind of feature, I spend more time explaining it because people go, what do you mean by like unlimited? If you want to hire me on Monday and there's a slot available, you can do that. And they're like, okay, but what if I wanted to do Monday and Wednesday? I go, if it's available, yes. And then a really awesome community. We have all sorts of people from retired pastors to accountants to university professors to comedy writers. It's a great bunch. Go over to schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code COACH. We are running on Podpage. If you want to check out Podpage, well, then just go over to trypodpage.com. Some exciting things coming to Podpage, by the way, that you'll see coming up. And right now we're using Ecamm. And as long as you don't hit the wrong button when you go to a segment, it's awesome, which is what I just did. But if you want to check it out, askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. And if you want more Jim Collison, and who doesn't want more Jim Collison, then just go over to either theaverageguy.tv or homegadgetgeeks.com. That'll get you more Jim. And it's time for our fun-filled Wheel O Names. And so who will it be? Will it be Ralph from Ask Ralph Podcast? Will it be Shane from Radio GDR or Felix from the Latin Podcast Awards? Well, we're going to spin it and find out. And it's going to land on, it's Kim. And the ladies over at keeptheflamealivepod.com, especially now with the France Olympics coming up, they're going to be getting a ton more downloads. So if you want to keep up on the Olympics, check out Keep the Flame Alive. And thanks for being an awesome supporter. We deeply appreciate that. And if this show has saved you some time, maybe it saved you some money or a headache, kept you educated, or if we just had fun entertaining you, well, then you can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and become an awesome supporter. We deeply appreciate that because, I need to eat occasionally.
It's just nice. It's validation that people appreciate your work. I mean, that's in that case, you're bringing value to them. They're giving it back to you. So we appreciate that. And I really do appreciate them. The 100% of that goes to Dave. So but I appreciate you guys supporting us in that way.
Yeah. And this next question came from Randy Black. Do I call him? I've always called him Randall Black. Does
I
anybody
think he goes by Randy in the chat. So either one. R Black. We'll just say
R Black. And that's it. Wicca. This was from a Facebook group called Christian Podcasters. And the guy's name was Justin. Wow, I cannot read today. Justin Audie Brown. He said, I heard on and he says, I guess he meant a podcast about podcasting. And the one he's talking about here is, I believe, Grow the Show with Kevin Schmidlin, because it's just fun to say Schmidlin. I heard on a podcast that your analytics on your RSS feed are not accurate. You get lots of listeners that will binge your content sporadically. And when I think about my podcast habits, this is true for me. Not listen in a few weeks and then come back. The RSS number you get are the ones that tune in every week. So if you have 400 subscribers, you need to multiply that by 10 to 12%. That should make you feel a whole lot better. I believe this to be accurate. If you have an RSS feed and a YouTube channel, for those that do, I guarantee you have more subs on YouTube than on your RSS. That's because YouTube counts the people that hit the subscribe button, not the ones who tune in each week. Your reach is much larger than you think. Keep going head high. So there was something I want to point out here. Number one, your RSS feed is absolutely accurate. What it is, because he made it sound like if somebody listened on a website, it doesn't count. And I'm like, no, absolutely it does. a lot of people call these streams or listens, and they go, well, it only counts downloads. It doesn't count streams. And the whole thing is there are no streams in podcasting. Now, super nerdy people will go, well, didn't like, no, it's a progressive download. And that means if somebody hits play on a website on a player, it will start to download it in chunks. And as it does, and if you listen to a minute of that, it will be counted as a download, and it will show that your user agent was Chrome or Firefox or Safari. So that's absolutely true. And so as I read this now, I'm getting a different vibe than I did when I replied. I thought he was saying YouTube was better. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. For me, I had asked the podcast coach, right? If I look at the audio stats, because you can go in and see how many people are following you on Apple, you can see how many people are following you on Spotify because they own that content. But I can see that we keep about 80% of the people, like people listen to about 80% of our show. On YouTube, it's embarrassingly short. Now the live people stay, but if I take the School of Podcasting, that would be better because this one's live. We're going to have better stats because we have, 40 people here. But if I take that same static image video of the School of Podcasting, where I'll get between 80 and 90% retention on Apple, I'll get maybe 1% on YouTube. So I'm always like, yeah, you might have more subscribers on YouTube, but for me, I'm more about my number one stat is retention rate. How far are they listening? How far am I keeping them, their attention and things like that? So that was just one. The other one is, and this is what Kevin was saying to kind of paraphrase his thing, and this is where sometimes we plateau on a podcast, right? So we get up to whatever number it is, and we're like, man, this thing just isn't growing. Meanwhile, our newsletter is going up, our Instagram is going up, our Twitter is going up, our Threads is going up, our Rumble is going up, and our YouTube is going up. And we're like, I can't get this thing to grow. And so Kevin's point was, don't just look at downloads. There's a whole part, there are all sorts of different ways you are connecting with your audience. And he said he made a spreadsheet where people can go in and say, okay, on this date, I had X amount of downloads, I had X amount of followers, I had X amount of newsletter subscribers. And all of a sudden, with that bigger picture, they were successful, more successful than they thought because they were only looking at one aspect. So was the point of that particular thing. But, you can, on one hand, I love the fact that YouTube gives us the stats over there on YouTube are just crazy. And they can tell you how many people are subscribed, where they came from, and how they found your show. I would love to know how people found my show. But
they control the platform, right? That's the key. They control the platform. To get those numbers, you have to get everybody in the same place. That's the problem with RSS. It's also the benefit of RSS. It's not all on the same platform. So,
right.
YouTube works because they control everything. YouTube is difficult because they control everything. So.
Yeah. Danny says, I always look at my YouTube RSS integration version of my show and set it and forget it. Yep. I can't remember the last time I looked at Ask the Podcast Coach stats.
Why would you?
The infrequent proper videos, I do get a lot more views and retention. Yeah. And then Randy says, I love Kevin Schmidlin, but I think this guy was confused. Yeah. And that's kind of why I jumped in there. And I have to go look at my response because my response was like, no, YouTube is not more popular than podcasting in most cases, depending on what you're sending to. Now, if you're doing actual videos on YouTube, that's a whole different thing. But Jive says, it sounds like he was using dubious information to make someone feel better about numbers. Speaking of YouTube, my latest YouTube, I finally jumped back and started putting some actual content on YouTube. And I saw somebody, I always say, if you have a question about Captivate, about Podbean, Buzzsprout, Blueberry, Libsyn, whoever, go to your media host. Because somebody said, hey, I'm on Libsyn, I have 165 episodes, and it's only showing 100 of them. And so some guy in Facebook said, yeah, Apple only shows 100 episodes. Well, I'm sorry, kids, but that's absolutely not even close to being right. And I went in and politely and lovingly said, yeah, that's not accurate. go into Libsyn and set your number of feeds, because for whatever reason, our default is 100, and I wish it wasn't, but you can set that to show them all. So if you have, 400 episodes, it'll show them all. And so just quit asking Facebook for tech support, because you will get people in there that will answer and it's not correct. And then you go in and, his answer was go talk to Apple. And I'm like, no, Apple's busy enough. They don't need you asking questions. Always start with support at whatever you're using for your media host. And some are better than others. And, yes. Danny says, I recall that answer. Yeah, I was just like, that's not right. So keep that in mind. There was something else I was going to bring up today. Oh, I can't find. Oh, format. I see this one a lot about people asking about, hey, I put my show notes into, again, whatever media host you have.
DR's question from over there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Was her? Well, hold on.
No, I think it was DR's question about show notes.
Yes.
Very beginning of the show.
Yeah, this is actually a different question, but I like this one. Is there but it ties in because we're kind of talking YouTube. Is there a difference for show notes for audio versus show notes on YouTube? What say you, Jim Cullison? Do you have any ideas on this one?
I think it can be. YouTube, the YouTube description and titling have all its own, infrastructure. That's not the right word. The way YouTube uses them, and they're changing them all the time. I couldn't even tell you today. What's the right thing to look for? I know tags were important for a while. Would you do them differently? This is maybe one of those areas. All the current YouTube gurus are saying different things, right? Who do you listen to on that one? But yeah, they might be. You might structure your YouTube notes a little bit different than you would your show notes. I don't, just because I'm lazy, and I don't think, because I create this kind of podcast like you and I do on YouTube, and I get abysmal numbers for them, just abysmal. Now, I don't do all the right things for YouTube, and I don't care. Like, I literally don't care. It's just a service for people. Some people like to consume it that way. I don't have the time or the patience to optimize it, so I don't. But yeah, you could go a different route for YouTube than. I'm not a YouTube expert on that. I think this is one of those areas and YouTube's constantly changing things to break the backs of the cheaters, so to speak, or whatever they're trying to. Listen, they're trying to optimize their platform, not for you, for sales. They want to deliver ads. Yeah. So if you think YouTube is it all for you, they are not. They are for them and their purposes and their ads. So everybody's trying to figure out how do we take advantage of that slipstream to make sure we're within the rules or in the guidelines or whatever. They're constantly changing things to make that work. But yeah, I would say in some cases, if you have the time to figure it out, do. I just don't want to, I hate that art. I hate YouTube art. I hate it. But right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got to make a funny face, or I see all these I watch all these DIYers, and for a while the yoga pants were the trend. You're building a house or cutting wood and you're wearing yoga pants. You bring your wife in and she's wearing yoga pants. I was like, guys, stop it. Do you realize what you're doing? Stop it. Stop using sex to sell things on YouTube, right? But you can't. It works for whatever reason, and it drives me crazy. And people choose. Listen, you can do it if you want to. You can do it that way. But if you want to figure out, how to trick it may be worth engaging or watching some videos to engage an expert on that. I don't care about YouTube. Incredible platform. We get some great use out of it. I have turned off monetization even though they still can monetize it. And at work, we don't fight that. It's the stuff I do is never. I shouldn't say that, because if I say it, not with that attitude, Jim. I always say I'm never going to be popular on YouTube. I'm okay with that. It's not the platform I want to be popular on. So I don't know, Dave. What say you?
I'm trying to. Well, Danny has a great point. He says I feel YouTube titles need to be more hyperbolic compared to audio versions and titles for apps. Yep. I know when I can remember. It sounds weird because, again, I'm kind of asking for the sale before they've even gotten anything. I now put the link to the website at the top because they are going to see that, because they always have that little cutoff part at the top. And then I usually I don't spend, like, for me, YouTube, people are looking for the links. Whatever we talked about are the links, and then I do chapters. So I have the timestamps. But I'm not writing a blog post as my episode notes on YouTube.
Nor should you.
Yeah. So a lot of times I'll take the same notes I had for the apps, which is basically a little paragraph about what it is, and then here are the links. I'll take that, throw it into YouTube, and then I'll put whatever my link to the actual website is at the very top, and then now my stuff on my website, well, that's a whole blog post with the player on it. So that's it. I'm going to have to go back and look. Ralph's asking a question. Does anyone use an app or service to post shorts to all of their platforms? And I interviewed Katie Brinkley from Rocky Mountain Marketing on the School of Podcasting. And shame on me, because I always say people are looking for the links. And she mentioned one, and I cannot remember the name of it. I have it in other notes. But and I don't know that it automatically posts it. I know Buffer, but I don't know if Buffer will send to, because some of these things, like Instagram for the longest time, wouldn't let you automatically post. They wanted you to go to the website to post, because when you're there, you're going to look at stuff. And so I don't know any off the top of my head, but I used to use Buffer back in the day. And then the other thing, like Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it, again, some of these apps have made it kind of hard to automatically post. And so that's the tricky part about that. There you go. And Brad over at cancerandcomedy.com, he's at a podcast meetup in Indy today. And so we're going worldwide.
Hello, Indy.
And Indy. So that's good. So
I like it. Awesome. Good to be there.
Excellent. But let me go back to my note, Joy. This is where...
while you're doing that, Dave, let me just say, I don't think... Jeff, you're going to disagree with me on this one.
Uh-oh.
I don't think, Jesse, and I know he's not doing this, by the way, but I don't think just letting AI create shorts for you and you blasting those all over social is necessarily going to be the biggest engaging thing in the world. I think you need to be, with these shorts, be very judicious with them, right? Be very, please pull the really good ones. Like, however you're going to do that with Reels or Instagram shorts or some of those kinds of things, please be judicious. Please think about it. Please don't let your AI engines just grab stuff. Now, listen, I know many of you are going to go in the chat room. That's what I do, Jim. Great. Awesome. I know if you feel like you're doing the right thing, do that. I think sometimes in the pressure to just do shorts, folks have let the AI stuff do it for them, or they're just grabbing something and they're like, okay, I just need 30 seconds. We'll get that stuff out there. And I watch these and I'm like, well, there's 30 seconds I'm never going to get back. Like, yeah. Or what did that mean about anything, type deal. So please, just for me, think of me when you're creating these shorts. Just please be judicious about that.
To me, shorts right now, and look, it's a branding play. You're keeping your brand in front of people. I get that. Yeah. But for me, they literally are all almost the same. Like, it's just, it's like, and sometimes it's like, it's almost like the quote of the day, where it's like, spend $100 on a microphone, spend 100 hours getting to know your audience. Yeah, good. All right. So that's to me, it's like, that's that guy's. Now, am I running over to subscribe to that show because you saw Dave Jackson say that in a short? No, but you should, but no, but that's not I know one person. I have one guy that I subscribe to his channel because I saw enough of his shorts that I was like, who is this guy? And here's the thing that's interesting about this versus a podcast. Like I know Danny and Mark on that show. I know Scott Johnson on What Was That Like? Like I can name the hosts on most of the podcasts that I listen to, right? We talked about Kevin Schmidlin. I know this guy is the guy with the coffee mug. I don't have that same connection. Now that's a survey of one, right? But I know it's the guy with the coffee mug, and I think he's involved in Virginia politics, like he's a local councilman or whatever. But he says all these great things, and his like thing is at the end, he will, I have to empty out all my pens. At the end, he'll grab his mug and go, and that's what she said. So I know him as the guy with the coffee mug.
Yeah, it's a thing.
And that's his thing. And they're hilarious. And he's kind of, without being mean, he's not the most woke tolerant person I've ever heard of, but he was a Green Beret, big Army guy. And he explained in this one why he quit after 11 years. And he's like, because the Army doesn't fix things. It's politics and blah, blah, blah. And again, it was like, that's a good point. So yeah, Chris is saying, too much mediocrity in shorts.
Yeah, and Jeff comes back and says his clips are put out on social or are mostly for his guests, right? They help me get more guests. I love that. And my experience with Jeff, posted his short. I was on his show and he took some of what I said and then gave it a good title, made it concise. Jeff, I would even have been okay with a little edit. It was a little long, which is fine with me. But, it would have been okay if you would have edited, if I would have seen a little, and maybe you did. Maybe it was even longer than it was. And it was very appropriate. It was titled, it was about something. I was saying something. It was good. And so, and again, Jeff, I was picking on you a little bit, and I appreciate you letting me do that. He also said he doesn't use AI just to do anything automatically. So Jeff, I listen, I appreciate you letting me pick it. I always have to have an example of some kind, and being on a show was great. But I love his purpose on that. He's like, hey, I'm trying to use these shorts to share them so I can get more guests. And that's great. It's a great methodology and a great way to think about it. He's got a purpose behind those shorts. I think sometimes I see some folks just crank them out and then you're like, what was that for? Why did I just burn 30 seconds of my life on that thing? So Jeff, and Jeff, thanks for being on the show, or for being on my show and for letting me on your show as well. Yeah.
And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see my latest one was a short that I was on Ralph's show at AskRalphPodcast.com. And then the other shorts that you're seeing there are from the one and only, he's in the chat room. You know him, you love him. Chris Stone from castahead.net has been making those for me. So good stuff. So it's
a little frightening when I see myself on your shorts. It's a little frightening. I'm like, oh God, I hope I didn't say anything.
Yeah, that thing where I said, guess what the microphone is, then explain how bad the audio was, and you're like, Blue Yeti for the win. And it's like, Chris is like, that is a short. Yeah. So
that was.
Yeah, shorts are, here's the thing. To me, it's a branding thing. Look, if you do a weekly show, shorts keep your brand in the minds of your listener. One of the things that in the book Platform by Michael Hyatt, if you haven't read that, I'm going to talk a lot about that on Monday. And one of the things that makes great content is anticipation. And I was like, I thought about that. And he talked about how the experience sometimes can be enhanced because of anticipation. And I thought about that and I was like, well, there are times when Christmas Eve is just as exciting as Christmas Day, because you're like, oh my gosh, Santa's coming. Oh my gosh, Santa. And so I was like, that's a good point. And so when you use these shorts to remind people that, hey, this is coming, or this is what you missed. One of the things I am awful at, and I need to start doing this, it's what I call the Harry Duran, my buddy over at podcastjunkies.com. Harry starts off, welcome to the show. In our last episode, we talked with so-and-so about such and such. You can check that out, podcastjunkies.com. Today, we're talking with Jim Cullison about robotic lawnmowers, yada, yada, yada. And then here's why Jim is cool. He talks to Jim, and at the end, he's like, that was a fascinating. He does the Jerry Springer, which is at the end. If you're doing interviews, do the Jerry Springer, where at the end of the interview, man, that was a great conversation with Jim. The one thing that really stepped out to me was when he said this, and then you tell your little personal story, which is a lovely passive-aggressive way of letting your audience know it's still my show. And then Harry will go, next week, I'm talking with Jeff C. He's great. He's awesome. Blah, blah, So within that one episode, you heard what you missed. You got some great value, and then you heard what's coming up. And I was like, I need to steal that idea. It's such a good one of promotion, because at the end, if you ask people to follow, which is kind of when you should ask them, they've heard they've heard 3 ideas for episodes. And at that point, they go, it sounds like I would like all these episodes. And they might actually be moved to subscribe a little more. And every time, it's so easy. Well, it's easy if you know what your next episode is, which in my case, I don't. Almost always. I'm working on, I've been promoting the one that's coming out Monday for a while. I'm like, what is good content and what makes it good and that whole 9 yards. And man, as much as I said, again, sometimes I come across as anti-AI. I had all this content, and I was really stressing out last night because I was trying to figure out, okay, I got this. Now, how am I going to assemble this so that it flows? And I'd made my own reasons of what stops us from making good content. And I asked that same question to ChatGPT, and it gave me like 3 things that I was like, ooh, that is right. Ooh, that's okay. Yep, I'm adding these to it. So now I'm not going to take what ChatGPT said and just copy and read it because people they're not very creative anymore. No, I'm not going to do that. But I was like, oh, that's a good point. People aren't as creative. They're just trying to do what other people are doing. So that's coming up on Monday. Speaking of what's coming up, I've worked hard. It's weird because I've worked for about a month on this, and I'm stressed out because I know it could be really good, and I'm just worried that I'm somehow going to just put it together in a way that doesn't, like, I want the puzzles to fit in nicely and just have it flow, and so that's what I'm working on right now. Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Well, I took the week off because of this conference.
Oh, yeah,
which
that's right.
Which is always good. But the last episode was a great one. Rich Hay joins me. We talked a little bit about like smart telescopes and some of those kinds of things. And so it's available right now. If you need something to listen to, homegadgetgeeks.com.
Nice. Yeah. And if you go to homegadgetgeeks.com/follow, you can follow the show and go over and check out old episodes and things like that. Did you know that's there, by the way?
I did not. Is that a new?
That's an automatic Podpage thing because you use Podpage for Home Gadget Geeks, right?
I do use Podpage for
and
that.
any Apple, Spotify, whoever you've set up will be on homegadgetgeeks.com/follow in the same way that you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/follow, schoolofpodcasting.com/follow, even though that site's not using Podpage. It's a good thing to have because then it's easy to remember and you're reinforcing your brand. Since I got about 10 seconds, if you haven't, I'm helping podcasters make better podcasts over at podcasthotseat.com. Not only do you have me listen to an episode, the whole thing, and look at your website, you get a free month at the School of Podcasting. You can check that out at podcasthotseat.com. Thanks to Dan from Based on a True Story Podcast.com and Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you want to look good, there's only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co. We'll see you next week with a surprise co-host. Oh, there you go. Jim's out on assignment, but we'll see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Introducing my new service, podcasthotseat.com, the ultimate destination for podcasters looking to elevate their game. At podcasthotseat.com, it's not just your average podcast audit. You have me as your personal coach, your cheerleader, and your constructive critic all rolled into one. Here's how it works. I do a deep dive into your podcast and website, spotlighting the fantastic elements that make your show shine, but I don't stop there. I also help you polish those areas that might need a little extra love. And here's the best part. When you sign up at podcasthotseat.com, you'll receive a free month at the School of Podcasting where you can access the courses, the community, and expert advice to further hone your craft. So what are you waiting for? Take your seat at podcasthotseat.com and watch your podcast soar to new heights. Check us out at podcasthotseat.com and start your journey to podcasting greatness today.